Hello, welcome to the People Profit Podcast, the show where we flip the script on traditional business thinking and prove that when you put people first, profits follow. I'm Sandra Coker, your guide on this journey to more engaged teams, loyal customers, and a healthier bottom line. These episodes are brought to you by Human Power Solutions, helping organizations unlock the human potential that powers performance. Whether you're a leader, an HR pro, or a curious change maker, buckle up. We're diving into fresh stories, real-world strategies, and a few laughs along the way. Ready to turn your workplace into a profit-powered people machine? Let's get started. Welcome to the People Profit Podcast, where we explore how investing in people, starting with ourselves, fuels true success in business and in life. I'm Sandra Coker, CEO of Human Power Solutions and author of the best-selling book, People Profit. And today, we're going to get personal. Expect some raw stories of courage, self-leadership, and reinvention that reminds us that life doesn't always follow our plans, but that's where the growth happens. Whether you're in your 50s reflecting on the decades of twists and turns, or younger and charting your path, this episode will inspire you to lead yourself through uncertainty with grace and grit. Our guest today is a kindred spirit. Her name is Kira Hartley Klinger. She's an author, entrepreneur, and founder of Dodd Oddity, her thriving Etsy shop specializing in vintage textiles. From raising 3 kids in a 23-year marriage that ended in divorce to building a solo e-commerce empire from discarded treasures, Kira embodies self-leadership. She's authored bestsellers like Fabric Wars and more, landed a TV deal, and runs community missions, all while tending her hobby farm. At 57, like me, she's a survivor who's turned life's trash into treasure. Kira, welcome. It's like talking to a mirror of resilience. I'm excited to have you today.
Oh, that was a great intro. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If Kira's journey moves you to reflect on yourself, please like, follow, share, and subscribe to our podcast. Your support inspires more stories like these to be spread into the world. Let's dive in. Kira, you ready?
Let's do it.
All right, let's go. All right, Kira, so you and I were both 57, survivors of, and I call survivors of 20 plus year marriages that didn't quite go as planned and rebuilt with fierce self-leadership. Can you just kind of take us back into your story? You married young, raising 3 kids, while others did what they wanted to do. What sparked your pivot after the divorce?
Survival, really. I didn't go to college. I married, like you said, very young. And I was okay with that because the only thing I ever wanted to do was write. And I always kind of felt like I could write regardless. I always wasn't a very good writer throughout the schooling that I did have, and I had some faith in myself with that. I was humbled pretty quick. I did try to write for the first, probably 10 years in my 20s and 30s. I tried to write novels because I loved writing fiction. I thought that was where I was going to land, and I went the traditional publishing route. I did have an agent and he did get me some good reads with some prominent publishers, but I never really published anything. I still needed to make money. We were flat broke all the time.
Yeah.
So anything that I could do helped bring in money. I cleaned houses for 20 years, which I hated. I hated it so much. I had lots of clients. I made good money. I could be there for the kids. That was kind of paramount to me. I wanted to be a present mom.
Yeah.
So when I got divorced, I didn't have any on-the-job training for anything. And I'd kind of given myself permission to not clean anymore. We had a big move across the state and I had to let go of all my clients. And I was over it. I mean, I was over it when I started it. It was just, it was a means,
Yeah.
So when I got divorced, I'm like, wow, what am I going to do? I don't have training in anything.
Yeah.
And I was still raising my last child. She was 14. And I still wanted to be present. 14-year-old girls is a dangerous age. So I had been kind of dabbling in buying and selling a few years before that. I'd gotten involved with going to auctions and stuff with friends. It was kind of like a social thing, And I would dabble. Oh, I picked this up cheap. Let's see if it's worth anything. So that was really the only thing I had to hang my hat on. So I was like, you know what? Why not? Let me see what I
Yeah.
can do with this. And
That's
that,
awesome. It's so relatable, I think, I cleaned houses as well. It was just not a bad thing, but it's not the funnest thing in the world. And
no.
yeah, I think as we get rolling, I know that when I got divorced, my youngest was still home and he was also 14. And at that time, I had my fitness center and I just was like, I can't live at this fitness center anymore when now he's home. So, just
Yeah.
being home there for the last 2 years. I think it's really interesting how we I think as women sometimes and just trying to navigate our path and having this kind of disruption, you've got to have a certain mindset and discipline to be able to make this leap that you made. And in your bio, you said everything started by accident, which I don't, we can talk about those things later on. But your intentional kindness, your positive attitude helped you build an Etsy empire with 17,000 plus sales. How do you think self-leadership and seeing yourself through these storms, especially like the economic shifts, not everything kind of going on right now, how do you talk about that as, to other people when they're like, I could never do what you did?
You would be amazed what you're capable of when your back's against the wall, and as a mama bear, I mean, we're fierce. And also as a woman that was told for so many years that you won't make it without me.
Mm,
It's like, the hell I won't. The determination has to be there. The spirit has to be there. The will has to be there. The willingness to fall down and get back up and say, you know what? Let's take another step tomorrow. I had hard days.
yeah,
Yes, I am finally debt free after drowning in debt for most of my adult life, but that didn't happen until like the last, I don't know, 4 years. So it
yeah,
took me 13, 14 years building my business to get to that point. So, nothing happens overnight.
yeah,
It doesn't. These fairy tale stories that you see on the internet, they don't happen overnight. I don't care
yeah,
who you are. It all starts somewhere. It all starts with nothing.
yeah.
So, yeah, if you want it badly enough, don't quit. Just have to keep trying every single day. Try, and do some reading. I really wish I had podcasts when I was going through this, because there are so many great podcasts out there that speak to people that are starting over or people that want to start a business, and you can learn everything that way. My eventual publications did not come through a traditional publisher, because nowadays it's perfectly fine to do it yourself. I didn't have a
Right.
clue about publishing. I had no idea, nothing. But I knew
Yeah.
that I couldn't pay somebody else to do it. So it was on me. And I figured it out. The
I
internet
love
is
that.
something that I did not have way back when. And it is a tool in itself. Ask
It
it
really is.
questions all day long.
Yeah, 100%. And I love that there's no overnight success. There's always that backstory. I'm a huge music fan. I love music. And you hear about these bands that just make it overnight and they're like, wait, we've been playing for like 20 years and these dive bars, you know. So I think that's really huge. Obviously you didn't have collegiate training, which we can talk about that at a whole other level. You had real life training, but talk about a little bit, when you've got people in your life that are, can you really do that? You should probably do something else. You're not really cut for that kind of success, right? You get that noise, and it's the story. Now it's a story that you tell yourself. How do you get out of that? How do you say, well, actually, mind, no, you're actually not correct. So this thought can go away. How do you do that?
It is super, super important to 100%, especially in the early years, surround yourself by the right people. Surround yourself with the people that support you. I had a very strong support network. And the people that did not support me, or the naysayers, or the people that, thought I was wasting my time and thought that I should be going and getting some sort of degree instead of trying to strike it out on my own, you have to kind of silence that a little bit. You have to give yourself permission to not listen to the noise. and to put it in the rearview mirror. And it's hard to do that sometimes. I take things very personally that people say to me. I don't get very many low star reviews on Etsy or eBay. I've been 5-star across the board. I can't tell you how long. I'm a people pleaser. I want people to be happy. I will bend over backwards to make a person happy. So when somebody comes at me and they're negative, it's in your ear, whether you want it there or not. So you just have to give yourself permission to say, you know what? Thank you for your opinion, and then move on.
Yeah.
Validate that they said something. I'm sure that they have your best intentions at heart, but move on. You have to follow the faith that you have in yourself. And I was lucky. I was raised to believe in myself no matter what, and to not be afraid to try. But there are people out there that were not raised that way.
And I think that's so important, is when you acknowledge this being said. I'm super sensitive too. I'm one of 5 kids, or one of 6 kids, and number 5. And, always looking at my siblings and always like, I want to do that. And as I've grown and progressed, there's that doubt that they sometimes will be like, and it's for my own good. Like, what are you doing? But I tend to not surround myself with even family very much. I tend to surround myself with other people who think like I do. And I think that's really, really key. That's what really, I think, as you and I were talking a little bit prior, it's really what drew me to your story. And I loved what you had to say, because I really resonated with me personally. And I think it would resonate with a lot of others. So, when you think about things, life doesn't always go as planned. Our marriages are proof of that. And it's good, bad, and ugly. It shapes us to who we are, right? So my daughter and I were talking the other night. She's 28. We had dinner, and I've got one child who's disabled. He has mental health issues, got all this other stuff, and she's like, do you regret all the stuff? And I said, the journey's made me who I am today. So no, was it difficult? Was it really hard? Yeah, pretty much. It shaped that resilience, right? Can you share like a raw moment where your self-doubt hit really hard, but your courage, like putting yourself out there despite, shyness, led to wins such as the book deal? So how did that all kind of happen?
When I self-published the books, like in that?
Yeah.
I mean, I quit writing for a long time, and I didn't necessarily lose faith in my ability. I kind of lost faith in the system. It's very, very hard to get picked up in the traditional book market. I have not tried currently, but last time I did was 40 years ago. You were lucky if it made it past the assistant's desk. Very rarely did you actually get the actual editor or publisher to take a look. So it was very frustrating. And I collected a ginormous box of rejection letters, and rejection's hard, and it's hard not to take it personal,
Right.
But I did finally publish a magazine article in my 30s, and then another one, shortly after that. Then I had to put the writing away because I got divorced, and writing doesn't pay the bills.
Right.
Not 99.99% of people. It does not pay the bills.
Yeah.
So it didn't come full circle until after the shops really took off.
Okay.
Etsy happened by accident. I started on eBay. I still have eBay.
Yeah.
And becoming a people person, well, I already was a people person, but extending that into my business and being friendly and being positive and being proactive and being communicative and, being a positive reflection of my business and what I believed in, and telling the stories. And all of a sudden there was my audience, my audience, they were the people who told me to write a book. And it was so strange because after so many years of begging people to read my book, I promise you're going to love it, just read it. And all of a sudden, without even trying, I had people saying, you need to write this book. And you're like, what? After all this time?
Yeah.
So, yeah. But even then, I mean, it came back. It's like riding a bike. It came back. I sat down, and all of a sudden I was writing again. I'm like, wow, I've come full circle back to what I've always wanted to do.
And it's like your life's passion. Like, I love that, Is there a lesson in there that you think would inspire midlifers, people that are kind of maybe going through a difficult time or or leaving a relationship, or even if they're staying in a relationship, that may not be good, but is there a lesson that could inspire midlifers to embrace their second act?
I did not publish my first book until I was 55. I did not publish my second book until I was 57. One of the biggest reasons why I chose not to try to pursue a traditional publisher again was because I felt like the luxury years of my youth were over. Not that anybody
Right.
knows how much time, we have on this earth, but when you're in your 20s, you're doing all kinds of stupid things, thinking, well, you have this immortal feeling, So yeah, as frustrating as it was, I kept thinking, well, it'll happen someday. It'll happen someday. I remember I had one read from an editor at Warner Books, and that was the most exciting read that I ever had in my entire life. I was just on pins and needles. It took her a year to say no.
Oh my
That
God.
was like the most brutal year waiting
Yeah.
and wondering,
Yeah.
And at 55, I didn't want to go through that again. I kind of feel
Right.
like, you know what? I am so much more life lesson lived than I was in my
Yes.
20s and that I was in my 30s. And I deserve this. I've
Yeah.
worked hard for this, and
Yep.
I'm going to claim it. I'm going to take it. I don't know how much time I have left, but I'm done waiting. I'm done messing around. It's like, I don't regret my years of marriage either, and because it gave me my 3 children. And like you
Right.
said, it's a life. Gosh, I grew so much and I learned so
Yeah.
much,
For sure. Yeah.
life can be hard.
And I think that's the grit that, younger listeners or people that are just kind of getting their start, they really need to hear that life does require grit, and it's not always going to go, and you're going to have some curveballs. I loved your philosophy saying kindness always wins, but with a firm hand. I was reading one of the stories you talked about. You were in a restaurant in your small town, and there was an African American woman who, was leading this all Caucasian crew. And that's really, even nowadays, that's a, in your town, still a real, it's not the norm. How do you think that observation helps, foster loyalty and the kindness with that firm hand? What was that observation like for you? And why did that hit you so hard?
I mean, I was so proud of her. She was probably in her 30s, and I still go in there quite a bit to pick up food. My husband and I have lunch together every Friday in the parking lot where he works, even the dead of winter. But so I see her quite a bit, and I have never seen her anything less than confident and professional and proud of herself. And, I feel like a lot, especially in my younger years, I found myself making a lot of excuses and kind of almost sometimes being embarrassed if what I said didn't land right, or I've worried about what people thought my entire life. And to some degree, I still do. But I've noticed that in sharing kindness with one another, I mean, it really, really, really goes a long way. I put these crazy notes in all of my packages. They told me to write the book. So what's the best marketing tool I have is to print out this thing and said, hey, you know what? Fabric Wars is here. And now Fabric Wars and More is here. Here's a great review, and to put it in my packages, it's free. There's nothing better than free advertising. But to take 5 seconds more and to write on it, hey, you know what? I appreciate you. Or be well, or, during COVID, it was stay safe, just something to have that human connection with each other, because we all have really, really crappy days, but we don't have the right to really rain on each other. It's just, I don't know. She just reminded me that kindness wins, and you can still be in charge. You can still be the boss, but at the end of the day, kindness wins.
Yeah. And when you're leading teams, this podcast, we really focus today's a different kind of recording for us. But, when you're leading teams, and especially diverse teams, when you lead them with respect, it's, it all just goes. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are and what, whatever, as long as you lead teams with respect, people come back in.
Running a business is hard. Developing your people shouldn't be. At Human Power Solutions, We act as your outsourced chief learning officer, designing custom learning and development experiences that actually move the needle. No fluff, no cookie cutter workshops, just results. Whether your people need better communication, stronger leadership, or less burnout, we provide strategic solutions that align with your goals and keep your team moving forward. Visit hpowersolutions.com and unlock your team's full potential without disrupting operations.
So, you're running your hobby farm, Camp Klinger, and missions for seniors, kids, showing this harmony and chaos. How do you balance family, business, and purpose, in everything going on today, the books, all of it? How do you balance all of it?
Honestly, for me, I was never driven by money. Money was always a tool. I needed it, and it obsessed me for most of my life because I didn't have enough of it. But the only thing I ever wanted to be able to do was pay my bills. I didn't really care about fancy vacations. I don't drive a fancy car. I appreciate being debt free more than I appreciate driving a brand new whatever. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
there's so much less stress. Family has always been first. Even when my kids were babies, it was always a priority. Now that I am a grandparent, they all live a couple hours away, but we get all 8 of them together every summer for a week on the farm. And if I find out grandkids are going to come for a long weekend, schools have a day off every single month for something, President's Day, Martin Luther King Day, whatever. So I'm always marked down for that 3-day weekend because it's one more sleepover that I get. I would drop absolutely everything for the grandkids. It's just, it's what life is all about. I'm not going to be remembered for this amazing piece of mid-century fabric that I sold on Etsy in 19, dear God, that shows you how old I am, in 2015 or whatever,
Right.
I want to be remembered for camp. I want to be remembered for, the crazy things that we do here. Last week we're doing demo on this house all the time, constantly under construction. And the next room to go is this room that has horrible painted paneling in it. Not from us, but it was empty. And the kids came for a long weekend. I went and bought a bunch of different colors of paint and all their favorite colors. I gave them a bunch of paintbrushes. I'm like, paint the room. And, they just thought that was the coolest thing in the world, and their dad, my son, he's like, okay, but you guys know this is something that only happens at Grammy's house, right?
Yeah.
So now they're like devastated because they keep saying to me, well, you're going to keep all the painting though, right? It's so thank goodness that it is on paneling, because I didn't really think that through very well. So I'm going to take the paneling down and reassemble it out in the barn where their chickens live.
I love it.
But that's the stuff that, that's the music in the world. That's the magic in the world. Yeah, business is great. We need money to survive. But when you get to that point in your life where you can coast, even when I didn't, I was still squeezing that. I went to everything my daughter ever did, and she was very active. It's just the stuff that matters. No.
Right. That's really redefining success, right? So it's like, I think a lot of us, when we're, the grind in our 20s and 30s, and, I'm grinding now kind of, as we're growing and building, but, I got a call yesterday from my daughter-in-law, and I went and scooped up the grandkids because she needed some help. So it's like, and they're only 15 minutes away. So I'm very lucky, but, those are the moments where, you grab those times, and success really is about the family and everything else. So when you think about our younger generation, younger people that might be listening to this, and they're either just starting in their careers and things like that, do you have any tips for them on how they can build resiliency early on, like before the curveballs come in?
Honestly, I think that there's something to be said for looking at the world through somebody else's eyes. It's easy to get into a situation where it's like, oh, I can't get anywhere. Everything's so hard. And, I'm not succeeding. I have always been really super strongly mission minded, and you don't need to have money to make a difference. You can make a difference and be flat broke.
Yeah.
Time is such a huge thing. And
Yeah.
even when my kids were small, I always encouraged them to do for others. There were leaf breaking projects for senior citizens. And my one son did a lot of missions down in the South, helping to rebuild porches and stuff at the church. I mean, there's always a way to help and to be present. And I really
Yeah.
think that seeing the world through other people's eyes, not only does it make the world bigger, I don't know, there's always just that little bit more of hope inside of you. You know what? I'm doing okay, and I'm going to
Yeah.
keep pushing, and I'm going to get to where I want to go. And gosh, people are just so grateful.
I love it.
We do missions in our town, helping to bring Christmas to the senior citizens and to the kids and whatnot. And for the past number of years, I have chosen to pick a senior citizen to take care of every single year, because they've lived life's lessons. They're
Right.
like at a complete life cycle right now, and they're looking at life a little bit differently. And they are not only appreciating Christmas, getting the things that they need, but they're just appreciating the human connection.
Yeah.
So like in this mission to get to where you want to go and to build this business, it's easy to get into this little tiny solitary bubble where you feel like you're the only person in the world, and it's you against the world, and it's just fight, climb, and making
Right.
your world bigger. I don't know. It's stupid stuff. We have all these chickens in the barn that belong to the grandkids, and they produce way more eggs than I don't eat eggs, than my husband
Yeah.
will ever eat. So, we have a soup kitchen, and
Yeah.
I take the eggs there. And we did that over camp this year. That was like a camp project. You know what? Let's wash the eggs. We have this
Yeah.
amazing camp bus that I painted it to look like the Scooby-Doo bus. So we get seen. It's bright turquoise. You can't miss it. So
Yeah.
we showed up during lunchtime, at the soup kitchen. And, the kids just jumped right on board with this. Kids are so naturally giving people. And as soon as they found out we were taking eggs, they're like, oh, we're going to make friendship bracelets for the kids. And so they just embraced it. I mean, it's just, yeah, it's such a big world. We're not the only person standing in it. We're not the only person struggling. Everybody's struggle is real. Again, kindness goes a long way towards others and towards personal growth. And just
I love that.
healthy mind, healthy soul.
That's amazing. I love that. I'm going to shift gears for a minute.
Sure.
So you're solo, your customers are your team, and everything for you, as you just talked about, thrives on relationships.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about AI right now, right? So how are you facing AI's impersonal world that's really popping into the world right now? How can you help people prioritize the human elements for retention and profit in their businesses?
Tell you that at least right now, while AI is extremely detectable, I don't think it does anybody favors to try to cheat.
Yeah.
And I feel like in my business, that's what people are doing. I am required to create some sort of listing for what I'm selling. And the better description that you give, the more likelihood is that it's going to sell. Now,
Sure.
AI will generate this beautiful, flowery, completely fake description that has no personality. And people are just using the crap out of it. And if I'm looking for something and I go to read the description because I want to know, okay, this is a vintage item. I want to know if there's anything wrong with it. I want to know, if there's scratches or rips or whatever.
Sure.
And if I don't get that information, I move on. And AI can't give that information. And
Right.
so beyond that, it doesn't make a personal connection with the human being either that is looking at it. I will always tell the stories on my pages because people resonate. People will tell me, I just spent 3 hours in your shop just reading all of your stories, and so how many people are going to say that about another shop, that you have this AI generated message that's just giving you this basic
Right.
thing? I don't even know what it is. I can't stand AI.
You can see, I use AI a lot, but you can see it, it's, for me, it's more of like the jumping off point sometimes if I need to just get a quick idea, but you can absolutely spot it a mile away on everything, right? And I think it is really important to kind of keep the personal stories and the personal connections involved in today's world. Maybe we're talking like our parents,
I
who
don't
knows?
know. It could be. I mean, I'm not all against AI. My advice is to use it wisely. Don't
Yeah,
let it replace you.
yeah,
We
absolutely.
start losing these human connections, and what do we have?
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. It's interesting that I've got kids in their 20s. I'm not sure how old your kids are, but mine are in their 20s. One's turning 30 tomorrow. And they're talking more about, like, one doesn't have social media, one has very little social media. And they're talking about more of the traditional values and the more things that they want to do. And then I'm finding this kind of shift kind of happening with them and their friends and things like that. So it's super interesting right now. Life is.
Yeah, and I kind of see that with my Etsy shop because this generation has become super focused on saving the planet. And a lot
Yeah.
of what I sell in my Etsy shop, and it's all been somebody else's before. Nothing
Right.
that I sell in my Etsy shop is new. So it's somebody's collection of fabric, or it's somebody's old quilts, or it's being repurposed. And sometimes
Yeah.
things that are being repurposed and recycled are things that are no longer perfect, but there's a society out there that are making new things out of it. And it's all on this mission to recycle, reuse, keep things out of the
Yeah.
landfill. So
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that generation for that too. I think it skipped a few generations because the millennials drive me crazy at auctions. The millennials, this is not encapsulating.
Yes. Yes. Not everybody.
Not everybody, but in my business, there are a lot of younger people that feel like it's a lot easier than it is. They think that they can
Yeah.
just go to a sale and pull out their phone and look up a bunch of stuff, know what it's worth, buy it, go home and make money. And it's
Right.
so much more complicated than that. I've been following trends for 23 years, and I know the
Right.
market, and I know the little things that people don't know about. And, it's just, I just kind of, I don't know. They kind of get the side eye from me. I'm kind,
Yeah.
but,
Oh, that's great. Oh my goodness. All right. So I
Right.
have a little, I have a really, I think it's fun. So, but my sense of
Okay.
humor is what it is. A little rapid fire session. Okay. So just 5 questions that I don't want you to think too much about, but just answer what comes to top of mind. Does that sound good?
Okay. Yep.
All right. You ready? All right. I know it's early, but all right.
That's
What's
okay. I've been up
one,
since 4:30.
good. What's one myth that's out there about midlife reinvention?
That we're too old, that we're past our prime, that we can't compete with the younger generation. It all goes back to that we are here and we are wise.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that. All right, what's been your hardest self leadership moment where you've had to kind of pull yourself out?
I think probably when I decided to go full time into resale and give up all my other side hustles, and to have that leap of faith in myself and to give myself permission that, what, you can do this, let go of everything else and focus.
Love it, and you did, and look at you now. It's really amazing. All right, a daily habit for building courage. This is more of a tip for people that are listening to you going, I want to do that.
Daily tip for building courage. I would say for me, I try to take a walk every morning. It's not a big walk, but I have this farm. I have the animals. I've been told that, these animals are, we have horses that never get ridden. And my defense is it makes me get out of the house, get out of my head for even 5-10 minutes every day. And
Yeah.
there's something about animal therapy, and there's something about being outside and looking at the world around and just taking it in and taking a big, fat, deep breath, coming back inside and sitting down again.
Love it. Love it. If every survivor, so someone that's kind of like going through trauma, transitions, whatever, what's one philosophy they could embrace?
For every survivor. Yeah. And that goes back to the courage too.
Yeah.
The courage to believe in yourself. But honestly, I really like the Serenity Prayer, and I have it
Yeah.
on my wall. I have to read it sometimes and remind myself that it's there. But,
Yeah.
basically it is, granting the wisdom of knowing what you can change, knowing what you can't change, and the courage to know the difference between the two.
I love that. Oh my God, that's amazing. All right. What would be your next dream accidental adventure? What's next for you?
So I've kind of already started this.
Okay.
My grandkids are like we said, they're super important to me. The older I get, the more I think about what I want to leave behind for them. And, I've mentioned camp stories. I want them to tell their grandchildren the camp stories one day.
Yeah.
So I started a children's book series this year. It's called
Hey.
Arlo the Camp Bus. And it's going to talk about some of the things that happened at camp. It's something that my grandkids can hang on to and that they can keep. I would like to have at least 10 books in the series before I'm done, but we'll see.
Yeah.
But this goes into this. The books also carry messages with them.
Mhm.
I have a pretty soft heart towards kids in general, and I've done a lot, I like to think, in my lifetime to try to bring a little bit of a better life for kids that are struggling. Not all kids are fortunate to grow up in families like I grew up in. So the message of the first book is I am loved. And the first book talks about how we found the bus. The bus was an abandoned church bus, dirty and ignored and overlooked and forgotten. And so it just goes through the transformation of this bus into eventually becoming the beloved camp bus, and so the bus goes through all the emotions that a person would go through,
Okay.
So I if this could be my retirement baby, my life would just be complete. I love what I do. I will probably buy and sell as long as there's a market for it, just because I love doing it.
Right.
But yeah, if I could take that into retirement, that'd be pretty awesome.
Very, very cool. So Kira, in one sentence, what's the courage shift you hope inspires our listeners from today's conversation?
The shift to, put the noise behind and to lead with compassion, to lead with grace, to lead with kindness, that in the end will make you believe more in yourself and your, empowerment with other people, because it's the people that's going to make a person succeed or fail on so many different levels. And if you don't connect with that person, it's going to take you longer.
Yeah. That is definitely the inspiration that we all need to hear. Thank you so much for sharing your heart. I really appreciate everything that you talked about today. So for our audience, that's a wrap of another People Profit podcast. If Kira's story of self-leadership and courage resonated with you, again, please like, share, follow, and subscribe. Tag someone maybe who needs this reminder that reinvention is waiting for you and you're never too old to reinvent yourself. Kira, can you tell our audience how to connect with you and explore Dot Oddity, or how to find your books?
Okay, so yeah, Dot Oddity is my Etsy shop, and you can buy the books there. I can sign the books there. The books are also available on Amazon. I cannot sign them on Amazon, but they're there too. I have a Facebook author page, Kira Hartley Klinger. I have an Instagram page that's also under Dot Oddity. And if you are a textile fabric enthusiast, I do try to do videos on Instagram as well when I have something new, or I teach burn testing. I teach all kinds of baloney. It's not baloney, but.
Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, I got awesome. And we'll make sure that everything is right down below. When we publish this episode, everything will be there. So for everyone here today, dive in today. Go visit her Etsy shop. Find her on Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn. Kira Hartley Klinger, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being on our show today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And listeners, remember, life's unplanned path leads to profit when you lead yourself boldly. I'm Sandra Coker. See you next time.
That's a wrap on this episode of the People Profit Podcast. If you found a nugget of wisdom or even just a spark of inspiration, share the love, subscribe, leave us a review, and pass the episode along to a colleague who's ready to build a people-first culture. Big thanks to our sponsor, Human Power Solutions, for championing workplace where humans thrive and profits rise. Want to learn how they can energize your team? Head over to hpowersolutions.com to get started. I'm Sandra Coker, reminding you that when you invest in people, you invest in profit. See you next time.